Planning Commission meeting for February 13th, 2023 will now come to order. First, I'd like to call the roll. Mr. Harry Miller.
Here.
Ed Garona.
Present.
Farhat Shah is absent. Warren Hartenstein.
Present.
Jim Miller.
Here.
Councilwoman Schnegus is absent. Chip Place.
Here.
And Chairman Ford is present. So we have 6 present. We have a quorum. Before we get into the agenda, I would like to say a couple words about Harry Miller's resignation. This will be his last meeting. And I don't know if you all, I don't know if his resignation letter went out to all of you, but he's having to resign because he's moving way far away.
Okay.
Too far to be coming to these meetings. He and his wife are moving up into Pennsylvania. He will still be with the school system, but the school construction department. But he just felt like he couldn't serve the city at that great distance. So we're going to miss you, Harry.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
We really are. The first item on our agenda are the annual reports for 2021 and 2022. And I believe that those reports went to all of you today. Is that right?
Yep.
Yeah.
I saw one.
And the way this works, this is essentially a summary of all the activity of that year that has anything to do with planning and planning department and planning commission. And it begins with a cover letter that the chair has to sign each year, introducing this to the state. And how do you want us to vote to approve this letter?
Yeah, I believe they both have to. Both these have to be approved. So it's not just the letter.
Well, I meant the package.
Yeah, the package
Yes.
itself. Yes.
Well, I then must ask the question before we take a vote. Are there any objections to any of the content? And let's look at the 2021, the year 21 letter and package first. Are there any objections to any of the content that's in this package?
Could I ask a couple of questions, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Tim, could you quickly explain what the priority funding areas are and how that differs from some of the other areas?
Yeah, sure. So priority funding areas are a state designation, and it's where it's part of their smart growth mechanism on how they direct where their revolving loan funds and that sort of thing goes. So basically, when the city annexes something in, if we can serve it with water and sewer and it meets a certain density requirement and it is it's consistent with their comprehensive plan and the state goals, that the state visions that go with the comprehensive plan, they'll designate that a priority funding area. And then what'll happen is down the road, if we need to serve that with water or sewer and we need to seek funds from the state to be able to do that, then we'd be eligible for those under priority funding areas. So what these were put in place to prevent was sort of this sprawl that some of the cities were doing, and they would try to reel that in, since they can't really tell cities what not to do. This is one of their mechanisms to say, okay, like if you're gonna sprawl, if you're gonna have growth sprawl, then you're gonna figure out a way to pay for it yourself. Mm-hmm. So that's sort of the gist of it. So as of now, and Diane can correct me on this, we made a change. We requested a change just recently. There was an area up near Bully Rock that wasn't in a priority funding area. That's now designated priority funding area. So everything in the city limits is under a priority funding area currently.
Okay, and you reported to City Council on the our growth relative to school capacity at the last meeting.
Yep.
Anything you want to add to this body on that?
No, just that's, and I think you understand this, but that's different from priority funding area designation. So we have adequate public facilities ordinance. So we just have to make sure that before we're permitting subdivision site plans, further annexations, that we have to have adequate public facilities. So what I had mentioned to the mayor and council at the last council meeting is the Havre de Grace Elementary School District will be greater than 110% capacity. It's estimated in the last year of their 3-year plan. But according to our ordinance, all the abutting districts have to also be at capacity for us to limit our growth, and that's not the case. They won't be at 110% capacity at the other 2 abutting elementary school districts. So we're monitoring that situation every 6 months. The Harford County School District puts out their new growth projections. So if those change, we'll continue to let the mayor and council know and make decisions on holding back our growth based on that as that time comes.
Okay, and the last thing is I noticed bike and pedestrian plan was not checked. And so maybe we can do something about that
Yeah.
down the road here.
Yeah, I mean, it was something that we had a consultant that had offered their services to us. They were going to seek grant money for us, and for whatever reason, this was before my time, we decided not to take that route. So not that it cannot happen in the future, but it hasn't happened as of now. As you'd mentioned in an email to me, we did receive a $140,000 grant for a Safe Streets for All program. That was part of some of the infrastructure package that is one of the couple infrastructure packages that have come out under the current administration, presidential administration. We are sharing that grant with Bel Air and Aberdeen, and that was a similar situation where that consulting firm put in the grant application, and if they received it, then the thought would be that they would actually do the consulting work. So that possibility is out there, and we'll meet with the representative from that company in the next couple weeks and see what we can put together. To be fair, back when this was being considered, the funds that are available now weren't available then. There's a lot more money floating out there with Department of Transportation funds and that sort of thing. And what's really great is they have emphasized that planning effort up front to be able to recognize what projects need to be funded under these different programs, and then you can seek that infrastructure funding later. So there could be funds out there for that, and that's something that we could look at and try to incorporate whatever our share would be into the next budget period.
Okay, well, it'd be great to capitalize on that.
I agree.
Thanks, Tim.
You're welcome.
That's all I had, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Any other questions? For the record, Councilwoman Snagis has arrived a few minutes ago. So welcome aboard.
Thank you, and I'm sorry for my delay.
It's okay. Do I hear a motion that the commission approves the chair signing this cover letter?
I make a motion that the chair be authorized to sign. You want one or both of them at the same time?
It doesn't matter.
You can do
As long as we recognize both years.
Are there any questions about the second year, if we're going to do it that way? Because I was just asking about questions on the first year letter. So let me just, before you enter the motion, let me ask the commission if there are any questions or concerns about the second package. Okay, hearing none, I'll entertain a motion then for both packages to authorize the chair to sign the cover letters.
All right, I'll make that motion that the chair be authorized to sign both letters.
Here, a second?
I'll second.
Thanks. All in favor, raise your hand, please. Okay, thank you. The next item on the agenda is the zoning ordinance proposal regarding separation of commercial and industrial uses within the city. And I believe our responsibility here is to give any advice that we may have to the city council. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. You've all seen the current zoning map and the proposed zoning map. And you've also seen this two-page document that, with the, essentially the blue and yellow bars that serves as a thumbnail synopsis of which use goes in which district. And then you also have before you a copy of the ordinance itself with its amendments to reflect the same. And so I'm going to open for discussion. Does anyone have comments regarding any of these specific uses that would be split, commercial or industrial, or how they are proposed to be split?
I have a question.
Yes.
So, of course, I want to ask about schools. I thought they were a permitted use in just about any designation, so are they, I don't even know, I should have looked. Are they even zoned commercial now? I think there are something or other.
Yeah, so it looks, so right now, we have our C commercial district, and that C commercial district, as you can see on the map, it's mostly stuff along Route 40, and then our industrial area. So all those industrial uses and all those commercial uses are combined. So as of now, schools are a permitted use in both those areas. So according to what I have given you today, it appears that schools would remain allowed in the commercial area, which again is along Route 40, but they're not shown as being allowed in the industrial park. Now, I mean, obviously, we're here for your for discussions with you all. So we could agree to allow it. We could agree to have it as a conditional use in the industrial area. That way, we can add those certain conditions like buffering or any of that other stuff that might be necessary. So we wouldn't want to limit that. But schools generally aren't compatible with industrial parks. But our industrial park isn't high manufacturing or pollutant or anything like that. So anyway, that's an option.
I have a question. Tim, could you just basically summarize what we're doing here with this?
Yeah, so right now, again, we have the everything on Route 40, and then we have everything in the industrial district. That's all under one zoning district. But some of those industrial uses that we have aren't compatible for Route 40 or what we would see as the future of Route 40. So that's part of it. The other issue is, and I'd given you a new sheet today that had the split of the uses. We have the recreational marijuana law that's coming up. Now that's just in House bill form currently, but there's different uses and businesses that'll come along with that. So this recognizes now those different marijuana uses. So what we're looking to do is just to separate before we get, and we're not adding anything really, except for the marijuana stuff, but we're not adding anything. We're not really diving deep into these zoning districts at the moment because that will all come out as part of the comprehensive plan. So eventually we're going to come back and do some sort of rezoning process where we're going to look at each of these districts. But right now, all we're trying to do is say, these things are more appropriate for the industrial area. These are more appropriate for Route 40. And in the meantime, let's, not mess up having something on Route 40 that's not compatible out there and not for what we want to see for the future of Route 40.
So you view this as a stopgap measure in a sense?
Yeah, this is just a separation, just a stopgap. It allows us to go through with our comprehensive plan process without doing too much, but at least separates enough of these things now so we don't, we don't have something that's out there on Route 40 for another 25 plus years that isn't compatible with what we want to do in the future. There were also just a couple things to clean up on here. Like we had sidewalk cafes, which you would never have a sidewalk cafe on Route 40. Doesn't really make sense. Parking facilities I had taken out. There's not really room for marinas. So that was taken out of this area. So there was just those three items were cleaned up.
I have 2 or 3 questions. So first of all, I think you partially answered that question. The reason you're taking out marinas is because there's no opportunity for marina.
That's correct.
Okay. Freight and passenger terminals, there's a huge difference between the two. And I'm wondering why you wouldn't separate the two and have freight, industrial, and passenger commercial.
Yeah, I can absolutely do that. I was trying to do just as minimal as possible. So in the current code, freight and passenger terminals are under one use.
For instance, if Mark ever put a station in here, you
Yeah.
know, it would have to be allowed in certain zoning. In fact, you might even want to allow it even in more than just commercial.
Right,
Might want to look at RB and some other things.
right. Yeah, like I
So we
said,
don't have to jump through a terrible hoop when that time comes.
I can absolutely make that change. Just again, I would reiterate, this wasn't
Now, uses,
an attempt to do a wholesale change over these two districts. It was really
Right.
just taking what's there in the code now and saying, this works for commercial, this works for industrial, this works for both.
now I'm also dropping down to the uses related to sale, rental, and maintenance of storage of vehicles. So maintenance is one of the key words there, and then you drop down to auto repair and service center, which is also vehicle maintenance. Is there a conflict there in our code, in our proposed code? And
Should be the same, is that what you're thinking?
well, I mean, it's the same. I mean,
Or
if
get rid
somebody
of-
comes in and wants to do an auto repair service center, and that's vehicle maintenance. And I think what you meant up in the upper one are the maintenance of commercial vehicles. You know, some sort of like if it's a place that rehabs postal vehicles or something. That's more of a commercial or an industrial operation. You know, whereas all kinds of auto repair and maintenance goes on in just gas stations.
Right. Gotcha.
You
No,
know,
that
it's
makes
just
sense.
something to take a little harder look at, I think. I also believe that animal care facilities, because of the, I think you're talking about a veterinarian. That's what you're referring to. And I'm wondering if that's even appropriate in a commercial district, if it should not be relegated to an industrial. Because it causes all kinds of problems for people that are near them. Something else to just take a look at.
Okay.
Laboratories. I think in the commercial district, a laboratory should be a conditional use, because unless you define a laboratory very specifically, I have 2 biomedical research labs right in downtown Havre in my own building, and that's RB district. And they're just very small wet labs. They're totally innocuous. And I can think of a guy over in Aberdeen that does nothing but test well water. And it's just a water testing lab, and it's a very small operation. That thing could be anywhere and not be offensive.
Right.
You know, so what I would suggest with the laboratories is you put a square footage limit on it. So if you got a big lab, it has to go industrial. If it's a little lab, not so, or at least make it a conditional use.
Got it. Okay.
And there's always been talk about putting child care facility in industrial parks, because industrial parks have a high number of employees, and I'm told that that it's very convenient for employees to actually drop their kids off within the industrial park at a child care facility that's designed just for them. Warren might have something to say about that.
I'm not sure the assumptions ever proved to be fact.
Well, I've just heard a lot about that.
I know.
Yeah, that's all I got.
Okay. I appreciate it. Oh, great
Anybody else?
comments. Thank you.
Yeah, on the childcare facility, that was one of the things I was gonna bring up. I, for some reason, travel around a lot, and every time you go into an industrial park away from here, there's childcare facilities in there. And I went up to Delaware the other day to pick up some stuff for the fire company, and right next to the Granger facility was a big childcare thing. You go down to Abington, they're off of Route 7, there's a childcare center inside that industrial park also.
Right.
So they're large, you know, pieces of property that people that do that kind of thing.
It may be appropriate to make it a conditional use.
Yeah, I think so.
That way you can make sure that a child care facility is not put next to an industrial operation that's not good for them.
Or a playground on an old industrial site that might have environmental issues. Yep, okay, I think conditional use makes sense.
Continuing on, the manufacturing use, up on Route 40, next to the old motel that's on the east side of 40, there was a manufacturer in there that was, I think from Sweden. They were doing work on project at Aberdeen Proving Ground. So that would limit the, you know, it's not a very big piece of property, but I think there's 2 buildings up there that they were doing their manufacturing. Just like the guy downtown here that's building the airboats,
Hovercraft.
the hovercraft or whatever, you know, they're in the RB, but same thing with schools. You have these, you know, they're not necessarily a public school, but there's private learning institutions that set up in these industrial parks, and it could be a, like the University of Michigan that does all the online stuff, and they have a facility that, you know, is their office and a place to use that. And the other one is clubs. When I was much younger and I was working on a project down in Alabama, out in the middle industrial park was this place called the Alabama Show Palace. And back when country line dancing was the thing, there were people that were coming from Alabama or from Atlanta, which was 100 miles, to go to this place. And the guy had all kinds of big name acts coming into his club. And it was kind of an impressive thing to watch the people fly around on the floor. Do their
Jim,
line
it's
dancing.
still a big activity.
Well,
Parts of
the
the South.
interesting part about it, it was, they had this place attached to it called the Back Lounge. And the guy invited us, he says, "You guys are coming with us," and I said, "Where are we going?" He said, "Back Lounge, open 24 hours a day." But it closed at midnight on Saturday, because they didn't have, you couldn't drink alcohol on Sundays. But
I got another question then.
Sure.
Yes.
So, actually, I got a couple. So, let's talk about schools again. So, this is just allowing schools to be a permitted use in commercial?
Yes, yeah, they would be automatically permitted in the commercial district.
Okay, because I just want to make that clear, because I already thought they were.
They are, so that's the situation. So since we're separating them, and now we have this commercial area and this industrial area, I took what was existing and I was just trying to go through the list the best I could and say, you know, hey, this makes more sense on Route 40, this is appropriate for the industrial park. So schools were, you know, I left on Route 40, but not the industrial park. But then once you mentioned it, if they were screened in some way, or again, if the outdoor facilities were not in an area where there was environmental contamination or any of that other stuff, the industrial park could be appropriate for something like that.
There was a ton of environmental contamination right there on Lewis Lane that I had to abate, so it could happen anywhere.
It could happen anywhere. Okay.
So right now, schools are allowed in ag and RB and R2 and,
I would have to go look, but I think in most places, schools are probably allowed.
okay. Because that could become important with the lack of available acreage in the future.
I agree. And I think because schools are a state entity, I'm not even sure that local zoning counts. I think they usurp everything locally.
They try to work within.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, that always helps when you do. So the 2 other questions were, is that, and maybe they're not on here for a reason, I don't know, but, or maybe they're under some other category, but what about junkyards? And used car dealerships
Right. So the one,
and used tires?
yeah. So one thing I wanted to clear up when I made these separations was in that commercial district, we kind of have this catch-all line. So on your second page of this list, they have uses not designated principal, permitted, or conditional in any other zone and not prohibited by other state or local law. So I've now have that in the industrial section. So that's no longer in the commercial, that's only in the industrial section. So basically, whatever's not in our code could go into the industrial park.
And then the decider is when they apply for, and then,
Then we would look through our code to see where those things are permitted, and if we didn't have a place for it, then it would be allowed in the industrial district. Where right now, it would be allowed in the industrial park and all along Route 40. And I think that's a good point. Probably junkyards, if we're trying to change things on Route 40, may not be something that's desirable for the commercial zoning district anymore.
and then car washes would fall under that too?
Yes, yep. Well, I'm not sure, because you do have this
Or they fall under the gas stations?
uses related to maintenance of vehicles, so maybe. Yeah, it's hard to say. Yeah, our code's a little funny, and again, I wasn't trying to recreate what was going on there. This list that you have in front of you is actually what's currently allowed in the code now. So all that's happened is it's been assigned to either Route 40, the industrial park, or both. So yeah, the only thing that's been added in here that isn't in the code currently is what you have under this medical cannabis category on both sides.
Jimmy?
Well, I got a couple of things. On the back page, conditional uses, bakeries are not permitted in industrial. What if you get
What's not? I'm sorry.
bakery?
Oh, okay.
Get H&S Bakery wants to come up here and move out of Baltimore City.
So industrial bakeries, I can add that in.
And then, I guess I'll hit the medical cannabis one. We haven't talked about that one. Does anybody know how the federal law, which there's, cannabis is still regulated there, there's I think it's called like the Safe Communities Act, the Drug-Free School Zone, that you're not allowed to sell or distribute drugs in those areas. So cannabis is still considered a Class 1 drug under the federal rules. So do those federal rules apply to where we approve a facility to sell it? The way the law right now, it's 1,000 feet from the property line, not the front door. And it also covers like parks and playgrounds and the housing facilities like up here on Van Cherry Court and probably some of the other ones, these federal housing projects. So that's something that we need to find out if that still applies before the city makes a decision on where someone can sit.
Okay, yeah, I'll look into that. As of now, just you're correct. Don't get me wrong, but as of now, the way that our code's written, anything not allowed in the code goes into either commercial or industrial. So currently, our code allows it by default, all in what is now the existing commercial district.
Yeah, so well, my question would be, we have all these vape shops that have moved in and set up. And you know, were they planning ahead that when the law changes, we're gonna start being a cannabis distribution center?
Possibly, but the way that the state is set up, there's only so many licenses. Those are given out based on a different formula that they have, but it's It'll be location-based, or population-based, so you'll have more places where there's more population. And then it's a lottery system. So if that's what they were planning, they got to jump in the lottery just like everybody else. And if they get one, then they could convert. And if they don't get one, then they couldn't. But they can't just say they want to sell, cannabis and get like you would a liquor license. It's not like that. There'll be limited amounts, and they'll have to win the lottery.
So the Cannabis Reform House Bill 556 emergency bill is currently being looked at. So once that has been decided on, I think we'll be able to have a firmer foundation of what we can do in regards to zoning.
Councilwoman Shanegas is correct on that, but just to be clear, medical cannabis is currently allowed. So the things that you see here would be based on medical cannabis. Recreational cannabis will become legal on July 1st after the House bill passes that she had just spoke about. In that scheme, there's a bunch of different definitions. There's a lot of stuff to look at, and we'll come and revisit that. But this was because medical is currently allowed, medical dispensaries, growers, all that other stuff. That was all I was trying to recognize here. We also don't know what the final bill will look like that comes out. And then after the final bill comes out, there's another piece that will be the regulatory end. So there'll be the law, and then there's actually the people who are going to make sure the regulations are being followed. So as far as the recreational piece, that's not at all what we're looking at today. This is just what is currently allowed under state law for medical cannabis. And I will look at the federal drug-free school zones and see what's going on with that.
Question about towers. What is the definition of a tower in terms of height restriction?
Honestly, I have no idea. I literally took what was already in the code and just moved it around.
Okay.
Yep.
We've got, I'm just thinking that I agree with the concept of towers being a conditional use wherever they're put. But I certainly think that we should not exclude that conditional use from commercial district. And just look around Havre, Grace. If we had a state police substation up on Route 40 like they do right up in Northeast, that would be a tower right there. And that's not an industrial district. If WXCY radio station has a tower in its backyard, and there's some other towers that are placed around right in downtown Havre, Grace area.
We approved that one on Juniata.
That's right. And I think that to exclude them flat out from a commercial district might be a big mistake. I think we need to.
It'd be interesting to see the definition, because water tower.
Well,
Yeah, I'm not sure how this is defined. That's a
Yeah.
good question.
but I would think that we would be okay allowing it under conditional use
Okay.
in the commercial district.
Yeah, they should probably be a conditional use in all the districts.
I agree with that.
Because you look down at St. John's Tower, when you think of a tower, you got to go away from looking at the tower that's up at the community center, the flagpole that's out at the Little League and WASA, because they don't build towers like that much anymore. Now they find a high spot, and then when they went to 5G, they're just sticking them on a tall pole somewhere, and they're.
Yeah.
The railroad did that, and in the town of Aberdeen, they put all these towers on top of the catenary poles, and then Aberdeen finds out and says, you can't have that there unless you pay us a fee, and say, we're the railroad, we don't care. But
Any other comments from commissioners regarding this?
I do have one other question. Has Havre Grace had many applications under the commercial corridor mixed use section?
That was put in place, my understanding, was just for the Blenheim Run project. So that was sort of crafted to allow that, because residential is generally not something we have in the commercial area. But we were looking for a place for workforce housing. So that was put together to kind of structure what would happen at not like a mixed use development downtown, but a workforce housing mixed use that had sort of a strip mall and a multi-family apartments, that sort of thing.
Okay. Because it is very prescriptive. It's almost written as though it was for a particular site.
Yeah, I
And I
think
wondered if it,
was.
it would tend, it's so prescriptive that it would discourage other mixed-use applications, which I think, the city might want to encourage.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that's something really important as we're going through the comprehensive plan. I think these are the type of things to bring up because I didn't want to change too much in the process because we're figuring out what we're trying to figure out what we want to do for the next 20 years as part of the growth plan. But also, just from a legal standpoint, there's supposed to be some study, some basis. You can't just change zoning just because. It can't be arbitrary or capricious is usually how these things get shot down. So I think these comments are really important so then we can have them in there and then maybe create a planned unit development overlay that's available for everybody that's not so prescriptive to one project. So I think there's a lot of ways to do that, but I think recognizing these type of issues as we're going through the comp plan, getting that information in the comprehensive plan will help us in the larger rezoning that we do later.
Okay, good. Yeah, I'm not even sure whether that industrial area would stay industrial forever either. There's plenty of
Never know.
opportunity to do something different down there. Okay.
Anyone else? Well, I think you've heard our
Thank you. I appreciate
comments
it.
on this ordinance, and we commend you for, I think separating the two into two separate districts has been needed for decades.
Yes.
And I think it's a good move.
Thank you.
Yes. Okay. Diane, did you want to do your
Yes,
presentation now while we're still in the
absolutely.
formal meeting?
Yes.
Diane Claire?
Yes, during the formal meeting, or it's kind of a segueing into a workshop, but definitely at the dais is
Let me
very
just say
helpful.
that as soon as Diane gets done, we're going to adjourn this dais meeting, and we're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to reassemble in a workshop down at that table. So we will end the formal meeting after you give us this presentation.
Sounds great. And we had to modify our approach after last month's meeting. Going into the smaller conference room didn't work out with the crowd that we had, so we wanted to be able to make sure we could incorporate anybody else. So we're going to be staying in the council room probably from here on, just to be able to have flexibility for audience space. But before I get started on my presentation, I just wanted to give everybody a heads up about the concept plan for bicycle and pedestrian improvements along Route 40. There was a public open house on Thursday, but the comment period is open until February 22nd. If anybody wants to weigh in on that, love to have that. You can Google it. It's publicinput.com, US 40 bike ped, and the BMC is doing a study. It's concept only, but before anything could ever happen, you have to study it first. So it's kind of a nice, we're grateful for their attention up here. So with that, I wanted to give you, start in on work session 3 for Envision Havre Grace. We are going to focus on sustainable community and the chapter on the relationship to the Lower Susquehanna Heritage Greenway. You will be getting information about the sustainable community chapter coming up, but I have plenty of information here to kind of whet your appetite for what that looks like and what it's about. So just going through the scheme of things here, trying to just keep marching down the list. Past land use, we're getting to the sustainable community in relationship to LSHG. Both of these, the content for the material that we'll be covering tonight, actually existed in past plans. And we're actually pulling it forward, and because the revitalization areas, for instance, with sustainable communities is so important, it's becoming its own chapter, as well as the relationship to the Lower Susquehanna Heritage Greenway. So I just want you to be aware that these concepts existed in prior plans, 2004 plan, but for instance, the revitalization areas go back to 1996. But getting started, we'll get into the sustainable community, which is its own chapter, a strategy for revitalization. This is a map I shared with you at the last meeting as a precursor. It's the sustainable community map. There are 7 revitalization areas in here. It's basically all the land that is east of the CSX line, and this was established in 1996. This really has to do with the state of Maryland providing incentives for reinvestment in communities. And this has been a very, very successful tool here in Havre de Grace. And even prior to, well, I'll get into the next slide, this actually shows the state of Maryland, our designated sustainable community, and that mirrors exactly our revitalization areas that were identified from 1996. We've consistently carried those forward. I'm sorry this is so small for you. The Sustainable Communities Act of 2010 establishes the revitalization tool to promote efficient use of scarce state resources based on local sustainability and revitalization strategies. We had those strategies kind of built in earlier than 2010, and we've been growing along in the process. Sustainable Communities is largely operated out of the Department of Economic Development. They work directly with DHCD, and when that act was passed in 2010, we immediately got designation in 2012, and we've had our renewal 3 times. Our most recent was this past October 2022. So we are current, and we keep using these tools, and we can access grant funds, community legacy, which predated 2010, for instance, community parks and playgrounds, and other revitalization grant funding sources. These are really, really important to places like Havre de Grace. We have other designations that you're, I'm sure, aware of. Our Main Street, our Arts and Entertainment District. We're also part of a certified heritage area, which is another big source of grant funding for areas like Havre de Grace. We'll get into that with the LSHG conversation in the next segment. And we also have 2 census tracts that are identified as opportunity zones. All of these are part of this revitalization area segment. So our 7 identified revitalization areas are our Main Street District, which is our commercial downtown, and these haven't changed over time. Our waterfront, our Old Town, US Route 40, Gateway Road corridors, Revolution Street, and industrial area. And this is just a zoom in. Unfortunately, it's far away, but a zoom in on those 7 revitalization areas. They all cover the entire downtown. They're kind of keyed together in a map, and we'll go through them one at a time. And what I'd love for you guys to spend time on is really trying to define for these waterfront areas the revitalization actions and what's appropriate for these. Really want to lean on the Planning Commission for developing an action plan for each of these. So going forward, this is revitalization area number 1. It's our Main Street District. It also includes the waterfront, so we actually faded it out into blue in the waterfront because the waterfront overlaps many places. But for instance, in the Main Street District, love to brainstorm with you on example actions. It's basically just like we've done in past comprehensive plans, picking up and defining what strategies or recommendations or actions we want to take to keep promoting the downtown and the Main Street District. So I just threw up a couple of examples just to start talking about it. Part of our emphasis this past year has been the Downtown Restoration Plan with Tool Design Group. The effort to implement that plan could be one of the strategies that we want to outline and identify. The whole idea is creating a laundry list of a work program, a to-do list. Continued facade improvement program, that could be another one. Just general strategies for business attraction and retention, but I'd like to take it to another step of defining what those are. It's one thing to talk about in general terms, but it's nice also to talk about specifics, how we're going to do stuff. So going to the next one, this is area 2, the waterfront. Example actions like our living shoreline projects are huge. We're going gangbusters as far as those types of projects. Additionally, park improvements. We have great waterfront access through our public lands and parks. So these are strategies and, building on what's already built out there. Park improvements, access to the river and the Chesapeake Bay in general. Continuation of the signature brick ribbon sidewalk connecting the lock house to the lighthouse. We have some missing gaps for that, but we actually have a lot of those pieces in place over the past 20 years to actually see that it's a total waterfront connection from north to south. These are just ideas of actions, but love to have you guys weigh in. And when we get around the table, we can talk about it later. The Old Town area is basically the historic core. That's not the downtown commercial district and the waterfront. Whether we ever adopted design guidelines for heritage tourism, for instance. Walking connections for the entire town are really, really important. And in general, just celebrating our history. Our economic development through heritage tourism is awesome here, and we just need to keep building on that. So those are just some ideas. US 40 is another revitalization area. Example actions as far as continuing to strengthen that area. Is it possible to have Route 40 be an area that bridges us as opposed to divides us? Cohesive landscaping and site design. We have a lot of daily driver commercial needs that are met. Everybody goes to US 40 for shopping. Expanding businesses there and making it all more cohesive. And then there's always stuff like the concept plan for the bike and pedestrian improvements through the BMC and initiatives like that, complete streets that make it maybe a little bit more pedestrian friendly and identify the space that Route 40. We're used to looking at it one way. Is there a way to evolve to make it enhanced? Just food for thought. And this is not immediate. It's just over time how we evolve incrementally. Gateway road corridors are revitalization area number 5. Again, reaching back from past plans always. Example actions here are developing individual corridor plans, whether it's Revolution Street for commercial bolstering. Juniata Street and Pennington Avenue are very, very wide corridors. We talk about bikeway plans. To me, these are great opportunities to actually think about a cohesive bikeway plan. The comprehensive plan will talk about a bikeway plan, but it won't go into the depth of design. But we'd certainly like to start to really formulate and initiate actionable, implementable projects. So, and then the gateways certainly linked to the broader region. Revolution Street communities, example actions, there's still Tranquility Townhomes in that site for potential redevelopment possibilities. And just in general, commercial improvement and facade incentives along Revolution Street might be really what would be great out there. How can we make it a more visually cohesive corridor? Neighborhood trees, I'd actually love to see that throughout the entire city. So some ideas to think about. And then the last of the revitalization areas is the industrial area. And sample actions, the separate zoning category as tonight being an opportunity. Recognition of this important industrial area. It's a major source of our employers. It's a great tax base. I think we under-recognize the value of the industrial area. And then, talking about monumental sign and better wayfinding sign from Revolution Street just to bolster its presence. So, and then in addition to just these revitalization areas, the Sustainable Communities Plan will also talk about sustainable projects. And things to build on are the fact that we're connected to solar arrays in Perryman. 100% of the city's power comes from, for city-operated buildings, we're hooked into the Constellation Array out in Perryman. There are two views of that. And I love the fact that the middle school, high school is tricked out with solar panels. So that view on the right is a view of the roof of the new school. Tell us, is there anything you can tell us about that roof as far as it being white and all of those aspects? Oh, just out of curiosity.
It's a 4-ply built up.
Right.
It's got the reflective coating on it.
Right.
Neat lead. What else you want to know about the roof?
I just think it's a piece of art as far as I'm concerned. It's really, really cool just to have all those things built into a brand new school.
So we don't own it.
Right, but you utilized.
It's leased. There's a private partnership agreement, and they've been targeting schools with newer roofs that have the extended warranties, so you don't want to put it on for a roof that's going to need replaced soon.
Right.
And they partner with us when new schools are coming up. And what we try to do is two things, is one, build it as without as many transitions that we can. And also, we build in the infrastructure, so when they come along, in meaning pathways, so when they come along, there's no exterior conduits and things on the ground. We give them places for the inverter inside, things like that.
Great.
And then it's all their equipment.
Sorry to put you on the spot. I didn't think about that, but I just think it's amazing, and they're also retrofitting a lot of existing schools as they can.
As
Yes.
they get new roofs.
Yes.
Yeah, reflective roofing alone is a big deal, even before you put solar on there.
So it's a point of pride to me. I think it's really great. So getting as far as other sustainability ideas that the city's doing, naturally everybody's very aware of the trolleys. The electric trolleys are a big hit. Electric vehicles in general, we were an early adopter for that with some of our city vehicles, and also just EV charging stations. So I just want to bring things we can certainly add to the list of things that we want to do. And in general, just being a city, a revitalizing city, smart growth in general is a very sustainable practice. So other items, habitat restoration and living shorelines, just as far as continuing those types of projects and recognizing the value for those. And we have lots of energetic volunteers in Havre de Grace, farmers markets and green team and community gardens. And we're also identified as Sustainable Maryland Certified, which is related to this as well. A different recognition, but all tied together. And I'm definitely going to need your help as far as developing actions for the 7 revitalization areas and sustainability in general. So, and we will get to that when we start our work session. And I will walk into the relationship with a Lower Susquehanna Heritage Greenway, which you received information about with a body of the chapter. Don't get too far into the actions yet. Love to get your feedback, and also love to get your feedback on the chapter in general. But the reason why this is so important, want to define what it is. What is the LSHG? It was established by, it was began actually back in 1992 as a group of local partners, a lot of them from Havre de Grace actually, really looking at trying to build on heritage tourism and trail connections along the Susquehanna River, linking Port Deposit, Perryville, and Havre de Grace. From 1992, House Bill 1 passed in 1995 to create the Maryland Heritage Areas Authority. And because the LSHG already existed, it became an early certified heritage area. But the LSHG was incorporated in that same year of 1995. Havre de Grace actually adopted a heritage corridor plan in 1997. It was our local answer to the broader LSHG. And then we've been, over 20 years, this area has been a heritage area. It's economic development through heritage tourism is what it's all about, trail connections and supporting the existing communities along it. The LSHG, and this is taking it from their website, encompasses 45,000 acres in Cecil and Harford counties. It goes up into Darlington. It includes areas along Octoraro in Cecil County. It reaches to the Conowingo Dam and incorporates all of the 3 municipalities along the Susquehanna River, as well as the county landmass around it. It's 22 miles of existing trails and 26 miles of proposed trails, plus national historic trails as well. Lots of 25 museums and cultural resources. And this is kind of hard to see, but trying to show the entire region, that 45,000 square acres, or the 45,000 acres on both sides of the river, and how far it reaches as an incentive heritage area. They have a management plan that was adopted in 2000, and every 5 years they adopt action plans just to update their management plan.
Diane, could you tell me real quick what the granite cliffs are?
The granite cliffs, there are bluffs in Cecil County.
Are they parkland, are they,
That's a good question. As far as the Donaldson Brown Center, is that, because it's state-owned land over in Cecil County, it's beautiful. There are these gorgeous bluffs and a really interesting mansion, but I'm not sure who owns it any.
The Hopkins Quarry out, when you come out of Port Deposit, before you get to the VFW, that's, was transferred to Port Deposit, and their plan is to make that a park, and I think there's like 78 acres in this old quarry, and they have
old quarry?
pretty much straight up cliffs.
Yeah, they have bluffs along the river, but then there are all these, because of the hard rock formation here, which we have the benefit of with Vulcan, there's a lot of historic quarrying, and you'll see that along Susquehanna State Park. Even here, if you go along North Park, the North Park Loop Trail, there's old quarrying that you can see, and it's all this exposed hard rock. But both sides of the river with just this vein of interesting granite. It's actually nice. That's a vein through here that's really, really excellent quality stone. But this region in general, and I'm almost wrapping up. This region in general includes 3 National Historic Trails: the Captain John Smith Chesapeake National Historic Trail, the Star Spangled Banner 1812 Trail, and the Washington Rochambeau, which is getting built up now because of the 250th anniversary of the country coming in 2026. And in this region also we have the September 11th National Memorial Trail that traverses through this region, as well as the East Coast Greenway, looking for a river crossing through this area. This is a map, a really great brochure from the LSHG. They have some really good new visuals that shows sort of the relationships of all these things, and the fact that this stuff happened here is because of the old colonial highway that we just happen to be at the edge of, in the middle of the whole Atlantic seaboard. And Havre de Grace benefits culturally through our museums, our downtown, our historic district, all of these. That's just kind of a composite picture of the ways in which the LSHG tries to wrap in our physical character into the larger region, and how we can use all the communities benefit from this recognition. And we also have natural trails along the river and future trails, ideally to Swan Harbor Farm and the Oakington Peninsula, which are under plan, not yet ready, just because Harford County owns the vast majority of the Oakington Peninsula, and they'll be putting together a master plan for the use on those parklands. Just a couple of pictures from our North Park Loop Trail. It's pretty neat what we have here as far as going along the river and the different aspects of it. All these photos were courtesy of Joe Kokendorfer. And lastly, just need your help in developing actions for this chapter as well. All of these chapters, as we went through the land use plan, looking for your guidance, looking for developing the action items. Love to have your comments on the substance of the chapters as well, but I'd really love the focus on the action items. And that's it. So,
Thank you, Diane.
Sure.
Question.
Sure.
Has the transfer of the, I don't know whether it's Exelon or whoever's, their recent donation of the acreage south of the dam, who did that go to? And
it's in process. So they are, we will be the beneficiary south of Route 40. The city of Havre de Grace ideally will be getting some of those parcels. I know they're doing a lot of title work right now, because some of this stuff is very ancient as far as trying to identify who it belonged to, because the deeds actually go back to the Susquehanna Tidewater Canal for the Exelon, and how it evolved from the 1920s, from the 1830s to the 1920s to it being Philadelphia Electric, I guess, and now Exelon and Constellation. So they still own it. The gift, it was made public. It's like 300 acres on both sides of the river that will be donated to different parties on both sides of the river. And will be the beneficiary south of Route 40, But north of Route 40, I'm not sure whether it will be a land conservancy would be the recipient of it, to try to contain it as natural. And
Does it change any of this? No, they're going to
no, not at all.
plan.
Yeah, we've had the benefit of leasing those lands for forever. And to put recreational facilities like McElhenney Park, for instance, is on Exelon, now Constellation-owned land. Our pumping station on Erie Street. We will ideally be receiving, I don't want to count the chicken, count the chickens before the eggs hatch or whatever it is. As far as these parcels, ideally will be coming to us. But we've had the benefit of them forever. But it's a mosaic of maybe 6 parcels south of Route 40. So
It does give the city more flexibility as to what they can do with those things, I imagine.
yes. Under lease, we had to get permission to do the improvements. And certainly we would be able to be more aggressive for grant funding, for instance, and trying to capitalize on those natural park areas, as well as making improvements.
Yeah, there were 15 acres that were leased to the city, not including the blockhouse property. And then the unfortunate thing is the person that was in charge of property for the power company retired and the lease expired. So that's like where they wanted to put the paddleball court or whatever.
Oh, the pickleball court, yes.
Yeah, that was property that was leased to the city, and now the lease has expired. But the good thing is that the power company lost their license. It was pulled back. So now would be the time to negotiate to get the trail through the quarry property along the waterfront and connect the rest of that trail.
Well, everybody's, game for having that. And I think, it's been, are you talking about through the quarry property? Sorry.
I'm talking about the waterfront property that runs in front of the quarry that belongs to the power company.
I'm not going to speak to that. I have that's
Well,
outside my pay grade.
The power company
Yeah.
owns the waterfront on both
Yes.
sides of the river all the way to the dam.
Yeah.
Some parcels are little narrow things, some of them are 5-6 acres, go several hundred feet back away from the water. But they own the property that runs in front of where the railroad tracks used to go up there.
Oh, I wasn't aware of that. Okay.
And
That's,
the quarry says it's unsafe to have people walking through our property.
Right.
Well, it's not their property, it's the dam's property.
I am,
And the Conowingo Dam could negotiate that and say, well, if we want our license, this is what you have to give us.
I am grateful for the trail around the quarry now. That actually exists. So that's for somebody else to consider as far as the access through the quarry. But,
Through the old green farm.
right. So, did I answer your question? I'm not sure if I did. Ed?
Yes.
Oh,
yes,
okay.
I'm sorry.
Oh,
yes.
yeah, just want to make sure
Okay, any other questions? Before we adjourn to our workshop, because Harry's going to be departing, we're going to be out a vice chair, and at our next meeting, I think the very first thing that we need to put on the agenda is to elect a new vice chair. So be thinking about that between now and the next meeting. And we will deal with that first thing at that meeting.
And just so everybody knows, the mayor's appointing Mr. Place as a full-time member. So although he just was an alternate, he's now a permanent
Say
member.
again?
Mr. Place, he was an alternate. Chip Place.
Yeah?
So he was originally brought on as an alternate, but
Right.
with Harry's resignation, the mayor's now appointed him as a permanent member. So he would be somebody that would be potentially eligible. I just didn't want him to be forgotten. I'm not advocating for anybody. I wanted
As a matter of
I want
fact,
everybody to know that he wasn't just an
I
alternate.
sent an email to the mayor this afternoon, not knowing what you just told me. and I recommended the exact same thing.
Okay, good, good, good. All right, so yeah, we're all on the same page. I just didn't,
So that our new member, whoever's appointed, will come in as an alternate, and we'll make him street legal.
perfect. Yeah. Yeah, we're all on the same page. Like I said, I'm not advocating for anything. I just want everybody to know that he would be eligible.
He would be part of the pool that we voted.
Exactly, that's it.
Exactly.
I did want to say one thing if I.
Yes, Harry.
All right, so I didn't write nothing down or nothing, but I did want to thank the mayor for his confidence in appointing me to this position. And I wanted to thank you guys for the confidence in voting me as the vice chair. And also, you know, I want to thank the city and everybody that works here. I learned so much doing this. And it's been a great thing. And I want you to know it's because of my belief that whoever sits up here should be a resident here. And other than that, I would have stayed as long as the mayor would have had use for me. So, but I want to thank you all. You've been great friends. I've learned a lot, especially you, Mr. Ford.
Thank you. And
Good mentor. Thank you.
Thank you for your service.
any other business for the good of the commission?
Just briefly, the mayor also wanted to thank you for your service here and on the Water and Sewer Board. I'm not sure what else you're doing with the city, but we have something for you.
Awesome.
It's a Valentine.
You look scared.
There you are. That's a gift from the city, and there's a note.
Pull it out and show it to the
You need to tell them they need
the audience.
60-inch TV up there, 72.
Aw.
Look at this.
And it comes with the stand. So there's there's a nice little stand in there, and
Wow.
something very local for you.
It's beautiful.
So what kind of duck is that, Harry?
The canvas back,
What'd you call it?
It's a
canvas back. Who signed it on the bottom?
I drive on canvasback almost every day. Thank you.
Okay. Let's give Harry a big. Okay, any other business for the good of the commission before we adjourn to our,
Whose name's on the duck on the bottom?
Joey Jokes?
You can look at it now. It's in.
can't read it, but it's not
It's in
Joe, it's
code.
not Job's. Okay, do I hear a motion we adjourn?
So moved.
I move.
Second. We'll take a 5-minute break.
Well, I was going to say, the goal is to really, we can start on the Sustainable Communities chapter, and I can actually flip back and forth through the presentation material, and we can talk about actions. We can talk about content. There's, this is kind of a little different because it's broken up into the 7 revitalization areas, but just kind of throwing out ideas on those revitalization areas, or also in general sustainability type initiatives that we'd like to see the city pursue that we're not already doing. So it's really kind of an open-ended work session as far as starting with the sustainable communities aspect and then working into the LSHG. Trying not to have it stilted for the. Right. My desire in working with you guys is trying to figure out the action items. So, and I don't know if people are prepared to talk about the different districts, the revitalization districts. I'm sorry that this is new information for most people tonight as far as these 7 revitalization areas, but as far as the downtown restoration plan, if there are things that we can walk through and talk about for the Main Street area that we want to see happen and bolster. You know, it's kind of wading in to figure out, you know, what we see for the city. What do we want to capitalize on? I know Chip is very interested in the bikeway aspects. I think he put together a really nice list of specific goals and recommendations or action items to that specific topic. We need that throughout the document. We've got 13 chapters and these different segments of each chapter that we need to develop action items for. Yeah, I'm looking at, not, to me, if we can do LSHG after, and just kind of, talk about the sustainability chapter first. If we can also walk away and think about it. So there's the Main Street District. This is all relating to their revitalization areas in general. This whole sustainability, waterfront. Do people like what's going on as far as the living shoreline projects? Are there areas we need to concentrate on differently? Park improvements, waterfront, the signature sidewalk. I ended up formulating this list myself just to throw out a couple ideas. And we don't have to arrive at everything tonight. This is kind of, in general, we're just getting our feet wet with a lot of this stuff with a comprehensive plan, trying to get into a rhythm of what it is we're trying to do, what you guys want to participate in.
Back to the part with the
Yes.
Main
Let's
Street.
go back to the Main Street.
First observation that I'm not planning to call them Main Street.
Okay.
Carve it out of our,
Okay.
and call it characteristics. That's different.
It is.
Goes.
Right.
And help in what we, how we don't do that.
That's,
We could call it the Main Street District.
What are you suggesting?
having it be its own district.
Right, but called? Yeah. Central Business. Okay.
Yeah, and that's the one process of writing about the Main Street hard on testing program. My plan's concerned further than what
Yeah, more, all of it.
all of it to be in the
Well, and this is specifically the tool design groups, the restoration plan, seeing all of that built out.
and
Right, okay.
perhaps even add a couple of components. Better than a proposal. About that. Tied in with that.
Right.
Is getting rid of the overhead wires. Gotta go underground with all that wiring that's down there. It just totally garbages up that street. And it looks like a rat nest up over your head. Washington Street is completely clear and free of wires, and what a difference it makes. That should really be a distinct goal of ours, is to no matter how long it takes to get that stuff underground, and it's not.
Yeah, I was going to say undergrounding or hidden.
Well,
Easier.
the only way you can hide it is to then trash up the waterfront, because you gotta chase it all the way through there. On Washington Street, we get away with it because we got alleys. Down there, you don't have lanes. So, I think the underground, and that's why those wires are still up there, why they're where they are.
Who is that you would go to for that? PG&E?
PGE. Yeah, but they're not gonna just pay for it out for good graces, of
No?
course. It's gonna have to be a program, and it's also gonna be costly for the for the individual property owners, because they have to make in their buildings. Big cities have done that for years. They've taken right in.
Conduits and,
Let's see what else is up there.
It's not working.
And a facade improvement program, we should always keep that alive. Some kind of offering or deal that you can take advantage of.
making them aware of it would be the,
Of course. But what usually happens, what we've got to be very careful of, not getting wrapped around the state historic district axle, where they actually control what you can do to the front of your building. Got to be very careful not to get into that. that trap. That's what happened to Port Deposit.
What happened?
You can't do anything on Main Street in Port Deposit without state historic review architect down in Baltimore approving it or disapproving.
What caused that, though?
Because they declared themselves a hardcore historic district. And it, basically, Historic District Commission has to approve every single thing you do to your building.
Have we done that already?
No. But we've got to avoid it. We've been doing just fine without ever having to go there. Pretty rare that anybody damages the historic structure in Havre. But when you put those kind of teeth into the law, what happens is nobody can afford to upgrade their building because they can afford to replicate. I managed a project over, or charge of the revitalization project in the 90s, deposit. Most of those buildings were owned by people that had very little money. In order to replace a window that it was coming to pieces, they had to have a new window perfectly replicated.
That's the case in Fells Point as well. I'm
And
an owner
it's-
down there.
And those windows back in the 90s, one window was costing $3,500 to $4,000. And you had metal roof on the building, and you had to replace the metal roof. You had to replace it with the kind of metal that was there, which meant you had to go to England, get turned instead of using tin or copper or anything like that. And so what we had to do is ignore the facades, take the money and put it at a maximum of $35,000 per building that we could spend. It was just a nightmare. We would have third-story windows just falling to pieces, and I just begged that guy down in Baltimore that was in control of those decisions. I said, let us just put a sheet of Lexan over the window. Let us take it out and store it in the attic inside of a crate so that when somebody one day buys this house, they can afford to do that, and they can put the original window back in. Nope. You either let it fall to pieces, or you're going to have to replicate it exactly. So all the money got spent on the inside of the building. Got to be careful of that.
Take the mic back, and isn't the current revitalization plan where they're working on down there, wasn't removing the electric lines part of that?
It was discussed as part of that. I think the price tag's always problematic.
And the other thing that's come up in the past, if we're going to call this the central business district, we need to define where it is.
Right.
Because historic downtown Havre de Grace crossed over Union Avenue on Franklin Street at one time. All the,
We've kind of carrying forward, this is the map that is kind of carried forward from past comprehensive plans with the actual boundaries of how it's been defined in the past.
Right.
And some of these strategies overlap. So having it be hard and fast, for instance, you'll see Union Avenue is part of the Old Town, and a lot of these things might dovetail. So it's not like it has to be.
but if we're going to create a new district, somebody needs to put in the boundaries of that district. Right, but on south side of Congress Avenue, it's a residential neighborhood. But in the past, the people in the residential neighborhood have claimed they're in the business district, so they were getting the funds to redo their houses and stuff. And same thing up on Union Avenue. You have the antique shop there that on the other side of the business district. Does he qualify for the same things? So that's why I say we have to lay out a boundary, and whether it's us recommending it to the city council, come up with a hard and fast rule, say this is the boundary, and if you live on this side, you're in. If you live on that side, you're out.
I can't speak to the facade improvement program. Is that what you're referring to
That
as
was
far
one
as?
of them. They,
Right, where the boundaries, if they're hard and fast boundaries, or if they bleed off at all. I can't speak to that.
I can say from an economic,
Mike,
the
yeah.
EDAB board, the facade program is hard and fast.
Okay,
And there's, we raise the issue of the equity issue. Why does this group of people receive certain benefits from the city by virtue of their location, while other citizens do not, doing the same kind. Also, speaking to the historic issue, the city at one point had us, in order to avoid that whole issue, and this would fit that intent, to identify what culturally significant properties within Havre de Grace. In other words, if we were to say what represents Havre de Grace to a person walking down the street in Havre de Grace, to a tourist or whatever, these are those things. And therefore, that was leading us, that was an outcome of the discussion of the facade program. For the example we used, not to be specific, but to be very specific, was the original hospital across from the library. If those people wanted to paint that place, which might benefit from being painted, then maybe the city should have the ability, or they should have the ability to apply for some relief, assistance equal to, because it represents. So that was the idea. Now that idea has, subsequent leadership of EDAB dropped that idea, so it's no longer in play. But it was, and exactly what Volney said, and I can give you a very dynamic example. You know the upper mansion in Bully Rock, the one closest to the, a buyer bought that, and it's a historical property. And in order to move in, needed to modernize the bathroom. Disallowed. They walked away from the property, so now the property remains.
Has been sold recently as an easement against,
right.
which they were compensated for granting that easement. So there are limits. I guess, I don't know how the current owner is dealing with that, but he is right now.
One of these.
topic that we started discussing.
He has one.
So anyway, and, you know, the hour is already,
Are there specific topics that you personally are interested in? I mean, obviously, you're hugely invested in the downtown business
well,
district and the.
I mean, I'm interested in all of them. The downtown, let's roll through the list.
Yeah, I
Let's
was
just
gonna
look at
say,
the,
we can.
let's look at the
because I
list.
think that's a great suggestion of how to try to make this move along. So,
Yeah.
waterfront,
I'm not, yeah,
want me to
waterfront,
stay on
Old
it?
Town.
waterfront, if anybody's particularly interested, from an action item, developing action items. I'll develop the body of the conversation, but it would be a matter of listing action items and trying to have ideas thrown out for everybody to then discuss at future meetings.
Run through them again real quick.
Absolutely. Waterfront, Old Town, and that's the chunk of Union Avenue primarily, but main roads. A lot of it's our National Register Historic District. US Route 40. Gateway Road corridors. That's 155, Chapel Road, Route 40, Revolution Street, and the main roads, Pennington Avenue, Union Avenue. What were you laughing at?
Gateway of Chapel Road.
It's a good way
It
to,
needs to function better.
I'll volunteer for that one.
Excellent.
The least sexy one, maybe. But I've kind of started in on that.
Excellent.
is somebody gonna collect this,
Do it at home.
this volunteerism and feed it back to us so we know who's?
It's a matter of, I mean, yeah, doing it at home. And
Taking
then,
notes over there.
no, he's like, not me. No, it would be great if, as far as if you have a mind to write and develop sort of an action plan per topic. Revolution Street Communities, laundry list of potential action items for that area.
I will volunteer for that one.
Great, great. And the industrial area. Coming up with action items for those.
Give it to Warren. He's the expert.
Awesome.
Yeah, the challenge there is crossing. Yeah.
Yep. No, and really robust language. I mean, the whole idea of, there's a whole new language to talk about, dealing with dual highways and making them more accessible to pedestrians, complete streets. There are many ideas that are out there to try to humanize.
So I'm volunteering for the downtown, and
Cool.
you're picking up too.
Right.
Warren, you want to
Warren,
do
did you-
industrial park?
You mean our industrial park? Yeah, thank you for
Yes,
the
is-
reminder. The
is
industrial park
Chesapeake
being it.
full? Is Chesapeake full and?
I don't know that it's quite full. I think there's some redeveloping opportunities out there, but it's getting there. I think there is actually one portion to be subdivided, but certainly trying to make it more identifiable and
Yes.
recognizing the industries that are there.
That's something I've worked a whole lot on. But, you know, one of the big issues is you take the central business district, and one of the real problems in Havre Grace is the division. Central business district would just as soon not admit that the industrial area exists at all. And so there needs to be a kind of merger of those, there needs to be a merger of that awareness, but that isn't, I mean, that's not
That's more a people thing.
right.
Is
that's
that
people
correct?
thing. Yeah,
As far as
marketing issue.
the view? Go ahead.
Thought I had about the So that's maybe a way linking
It's good.
throughout.
Vast difference. Electric Park. Five with that.
They need
Knocking on doors, right?
some of them working there.
But it needs to stay industrial. Stay the focus of that group.
The awareness.
To industries.
Right.
But in the meantime, it's really interesting is that we do have this trail connection that actually, it's hard to imagine, but at the end of Clark Road, between the buildings, which was the old Solo Cup, and trying to think of the one to the east of it, there is an actual natural trail that's being developed that will link Havre de Grace to Swan Harbor Farm, and then ultimately to the remainder of the Oakington Peninsula.
Well, having a trail. Not what I'm talking.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
no,
so-
really, but looking at it differently
Yeah.
as far as the opportunity.
So the fact that
But also getting to Clark Road, which is a nice wide boulevard of a road. Are there ways to make even painted improvements along Clark Road? You have full walkability along Revolution Street. Might not be the widest sidewalks, but we actually, where are the gaps? How do we make this connectivity happen? How do you get people engaged to recognize it? Because it's a really cool opportunity. I think it's like 1,200 acres that the Harford County Parks and Rec now owns on Oakington. 3 major parcels that are all colonial farmlands that eventually will have trail systems, and how we can actually have direct access to that by not having to far out to go.
these days,
Yeah.
downtown.
We've already, by the way, negotiated with Shaw, the owner of the former paint plant, on that corner on his property to mount an attractive sign identifying the Havre de Grace industrial area, technology area, whatever. There's been some, but and not putting names of companies on it, but he's already
Directing.
volunteered that. And really, we were at the point with Shane where he was asking us for a design, and he felt he could go get the money to get it built.
It'd be great to see that implemented.
On the gateways, by the way, and one of the issues there, just to touch on that, on gateways, one of the things we were dealing with in that sign was saying there ought to be a standard gateway presentation. Whether you're coming down 155 or you're coming across 40, there ought to be some standardization of the entry. And that kind of, that became a challenge in this sign. What we need to do is convince the National Guard to move down to Aberdeen Proving Ground and turn the rest of that property into Chesapeake Industrial Park. They're not
They're
using most
investing
of
a
it.
lot down there. Yeah, they're putting a lot of,
They've got a lot of big
Down there,
concrete
yes.
pads with nothing but one rusty piece of equipment on it.
But it would be interesting to have like signage that recognized the GRA and showed what it looked like, and there are still remnants down there,
Yeah.
so. Still- Full idea.
Old Town,
Back. Uh, Old Town, waterfront. Volney, you were on downtown and Revolution Street.
The operations center. Revolution Street post.
We'll have to clarify it for the naming of this, but you want that section? A description of what that could be. Okay, very good. So, any takers for waterfront?
I'll do the waterfront. That's easy.
Clint?
Continue what we've been doing.
You have to identify it all. You have to enumerate it.
I would like the
Very cool.
definition of action item. Is an action item.
I would like to make this more of an active document than just making recommendations. More of a list of like actionable things. Active language as opposed to the term plannerese, and just something that where you recommend something to do, and it's not necessarily very engaging as far as trying to get it actually done. So, I mean, you can call it whatever, strategies, action items. The goal is to make it a little bit more active than just recommendations of things you want to see done. You know, we're trying to formulate a plan for the future. We want to see things maybe evolve, not necessarily change outright, but evolve in a better way. I mean, that's the whole idea of visioning. General is you're working with what you have, but you're trying to make it better, so. Sure.
Because I've done a lot of.
Yeah. Thanks for the reminder.
Wasn't. That's how
Otsego, Ohio, yeah.
all that, so. Some of them don't.
I see a lot, we've done a lot of growing over time, over the past 20 years, but now I see a lot of almost inward looking and reinvestment in those types of linkages. What's really cool about Havre de Grace are those connectivity aspects, the downtown walkability. If we could make things successful across Route 40 or make them safer along Chapel Road over time, identify them, design corridors. I mean, Chapel Road was a rural road that was added to over time with development, and it's this hodgepodge of weird design that, how do you come back and in the roadway, you know, even if it's just paint striping, trying to make it a little bit more cohesive. Maybe it's incremental, but looking at it in its totality to make it more of a cohesive thoroughfare as it collects the neighborhoods along there. exit downtown. And we're not going to fix everything, but if we can edge towards better,
How do you deal
That's-
with the private property issues on Chapel Road? Because most of the people on Chapel Road own to the center.
not all, right.
Figure it out. Identify that. Figure out that that's something. That's going to be complicated.
Kind of have to see it to be able to put words to it, to then do it. In Chapel Road, there aren't that many. There are some that own to the center road that have not been annexed with the city, but a lot of it, the right-of-way is owned by the city. And, you know, how do you take it and incrementally improve it so that it's kind of has a standard feel to it? And it's a retrofitting. It's looking at it differently and
Or not let things happen that would be irreversible or.
Chapel Road in the city belongs to the people that live there than belong. Railroad tracks all the way up to
there are a few,
right-hand side, all of that is,
Donnybrook and individual homes along.
they all own that. I think you make this, want it to go over, you make it as a recommendation and not say, this is what we're gonna do.
You can call it a strategy, you can soften it, or whatever, but
You could sign me up for downtown business in Old Town. Well, are we going to double up some, or?
And you can work
That's
on
my
it
interest.
individually, or you can work on them together, whichever two, I mean, yeah.
Okay.
Awesome. The underpass,
That's also the open space for the development up there.
we're gonna stay to this side of CSX.
Okay, how about waterfront? Who wants waterfront?
Could I do that?
Great.
At some point, CSA underpass is more expensive than the inconvenience, although they are saying, their argument the last time was, been told by Bob Ward, that they didn't, they didn't Brightview and did not want.
That stuff can be.
Crossings underneath the CSX rail line, all private crossings, they were not. B&O Railroad would have still been in existence, turned over to CSX and moved all their Sparta. They would have never approved. That was a private crossing for a guy named Nelson Lewis that owned the property up there. His house was in the middle of 40. Read the history of Havre Grace when the British retaliated for the invasion or fired a cannon at them. Townsfolk went up to the house there, Pringle Mansion. Read the deeds from when the railroad came through, called the Pennsylvania Railroad. I always knew it as Southern and Amtrak. They took the land from Nelson Lewis to go across new line in, which the current line is. That's why there used to be a bridge there that railroad was responsible for, and it was a little one-lane, 20-foot wide bridge. The city decided they were going to take that, even though the railroad was responsible for maintaining that. And when the B&O Railroad came through, they condemned that, so they put an opening there so Nelson Lewis could get to the other side. Restricted to couple families up there, annexed that property in, and we development over there.
I don't think so. Everybody's.
Right, this is our third meeting on this. Are we getting updates on?
You mean as far as the past material, or?
Yeah, like the past material, we went and we reviewed it and we put our input into it, getting a dated product.
Right now, the only one that was delivered was the land use plan chapter. So as far as the feedback, I'm going to collect it as I can. I'm too busy writing forward to be able to capture everything and send it back. And I ended up getting some recommendations only in general, in totality. I don't know where they all fit yet. So I'm happy to take just sort of the open-ended comments. But I don't know, for instance, we didn't necessarily get into the meat like we are tonight of the recommendations for the land use chapter, but certainly we want to build that. I'm looking for your recommendations from that as well. Trying to figure out how all this thing gets built, 13 chapters deep, so.
Diane?
Go ahead.
Right now, I'm alone. If I want to sit down with you.
Absolutely. That would be great. And we can flip now really quickly. I don't know if we want to spend time on the LSHG. There was actually substance there as far as a chapter. I'd love your feedback on that, if there's stuff to add to the chapter itself. But again, just kind of leaving the action items open point and kind of building it as we go. This is a fluid process. I don't have any answers. I'm just kind of hang on and and make it happen.
I'll add some comments on the trail systems, and
okay.
the waterfront is big part of that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, and we actually, with the whole, I'll just flip through real quick, with the LSHG, there are some maps that show our local answer to the broader picture related to the LSHG. So it's definitely applicable to the waterfront and those connections. And we don't have to spend time on this one tonight. I think we're 8:30.
Or electric ferry.
I saw something on that the other day, and I don't remember what it's called, but the old covered bridge going for deposit.
It was an ad hoc group, but it was, yeah, I don't know what the members.
Cost, too. Or hit the rocks.
The proposal I saw showed a pedestrian bridge.
High enough above the floodplain, floodwater?
Correct. Right. The 1906. No, they were evaluated in 1999, and they're not structurally sound. They will actually be removed to the mud line for the 2 new bridges that are going in because they become a navigational hazard. So,
all the rest of the piers. First pier, that pier happens to be on land. That's the pier that lacks and everything.
Tree stumps and all.
This sounds like a project.
absolutely. It's actually even bigger than the BMC because we're on the edge of Wilmapco, which is the MPO on Cecil County side versus Baltimore Metropolitan. We're on the outer edges of both of them. So, yes, and the whole idea of the LSHG in their management plan in 2000 identified 2 crossings. The whole idea, it was a wish list. It's a very ambitious, maybe audacious plan to look at river crossings because we have all these bridges in this area, but the only way you can successfully cross pedestrian-wise, you have to go up to Wrightsville, Pennsylvania. So the whole loop is like 100 miles out of its way to get a mile across. So the whole idea of river crossings in general as trying to connect both sides of the river and the municipalities on both sides, the historic communities on both sides, and make it a thing, make it a big, much bigger trail system and network, and definitely the crossings are the most ambitious aspect of this idea. And the whole thing with the bridge coming into play, and maybe it's ahead of our, the times to think about it, but the fact that they're replacing bridges, and Amtrak did not preclude a third span when they did their initial study, which ended in 2017. They always left that door open for, they're not building it, they're not in the business to do pedestrian crossings, but they did not preclude a third span. So, and the whole idea was having a crossing here, pedestrian crossing potentially in this general area because of the population centers, and then having one upriver in the trail, and a lower one closer to the river that would make a more or less a loop. Very, very ambitious, but you have to sort of think long range to ever even happen. Right. Correct. It's,
Diane, at one point there was a nascent plan coming out. Water taxi.
yes, and that's always been a possibility. We built lots of piers to accommodate such a thing, but it's either, how do you subsidize a water taxi as transportation, or have a commercial venture? And the whole idea is a critical mass of making it successful as a commercial venture. But you could absolutely subsidize a water taxi for long term relative to a pedestrian bridge. But ideally, I would like to think we could agree that a river crossing would be a beneficial thing for the region in general, and how to get it, and how to get a much bigger study about it that builds it in at the level of the BMC or Will MAPCO or the state of Maryland. So, I mean, you have to, it's much bigger than us. So, and it's not just us in the Greenway, it's the East Coast Greenway, which actually traverses from Maine to Florida, passes through this region, and would like to pass through this region. And it's coincidental with the September 11th trail, which National Memorial Trail that just got adopted by Congress last year. So, so there are multiple factors here that just because we're on the Kings Highway, the old colonial route along the eastern seaboard, we have these 3 National Historic Trails, our relationship to the bay. It just is kind of weird that we're this transportation epicenter that happened because of our history. We're sitting on the edge of it. So anyway, Chesapeake Bay as our original highways, and then this being the first point of overland transportation between Eastern Shore and Western Shore, Maryland, but also along the whole eastern seaboard. This was the first opportunity. Otherwise, you were in sailing vessels. So anyway, it's kind of weird. We're just here thinking, thinking big. So
Should we,
sounds great.
Great.
I think that would be great. I think you have to submit it to us in planning, and then we distribute out to everybody. The protocol, is that correct, Eric, for preferred? So just, if we, it's kind of awkward, but if we can. Yeah, or Eric, either way, or both of us, that would be great. He's kind of the coalescing point. Hello.
Collaborate with your partner.
Collaborate.
Absolutely. Great.
That way we've all just.
Or throw darts at it at the next meeting, where we're adding to it, right. Absolutely.
When I send out the agenda for the emails, everybody is, receiving the emails, so we're all a part of the same email group, that is technically a quorum. A quorum. Okay, so, responding to an email with, like reply all is technically,
Oh, yeah. This should not reply.
you can reply to me or Diane or both of us, just don't reply to the other members. Or if you do, you have to do it one-on-one.
I was
It's the
part of
same,
creating.
the digital is the same thing as sitting right here at the round table. It's just,
Televised, that's right. And trying to figure out how to deal with, within the confines of the Open Meetings Act.
I was part of
but-
the protocol.
Yeah.
Emails. All of
Gotcha.
these. There's a software company. Hit reply all, and they'd be hitting 2,000 recipients worldwide, 10 offices in China, and getting them to stop that, particularly with the tech people who thought their job, what they were doing,
Was to send it.
was the most important thing in the face of the earth. You could not, you almost had to take their email away from them.
So you can
Yeah, we need
reply
to
back to
streamline
the
it.
staff.
just don't have a quorum.
And have a
Just
quorum.
don't have a quorum.
Anyway, are we done?
We're done.
Where?
Next meeting is on a Tuesday night, right?
You, is it March?
The following. 4, 5, 6, April, May, June, or both on or all on Tuesday.
Sessions. Yeah, they had to get pushed off a little bit for Tuesday nights.
I don't have a problem with the meeting.
Jimmy, do you want him? Are we still on? Are we wrapped up?
Talking about the next
1 minute.
question of the forum. March meeting. We'll remind you of that at the March meeting. March is the 13th.
And then April, May, and June is the following Tuesday.
Oh, the second. Seventh. Always the second Monday. Right in between council's first and third.
Are we good for We're being wrapped out then?
We're finished. Good night, all.